right, everyone. My name is Jake Seller. I'm the CEO of Secure-Centric. And today, do we have a lineup for you? First of all, we want to thank everyone for coming here. It takes something to be here, especially in your guys' busy day. And so we're excited to have you. We've got an exciting agenda today. We're going to be discussing from gap assessment to audit readiness. In this day and age, CMMC compliance isn't crystal clear. There's a lot of gray areas, and the purpose of today is to really create clarity for you guys. So we have some of the best experts that are going to be helping you build a strategy, and we're hoping by the end of it today, you maybe walk away with one or two tidbits that you can use for your own strategy so you can accomplish your CMMC objectives. Just a quick overview of Secure-Centric. We've been in this for a long time, about 5+ years, and we have almost 110 different clients in the defense industrial base, and we're a registered practitioner organization. And so we're excited to help you guys as you build trust and clarity when it comes to CMMC compliance. Wanted to make a couple introductions. We've got some of the best and the brightest CMMC experts today. I'll kick it off. Maybe Rich, you can go first, introduce yourself, and then we'll go to Ben.
Hi, everybody. My name's Rich Bates. I'm the founder of the Pridwin Advisory. Been in the 800-171 world since version 0.5, and excited to be here and hopefully get you all down the proper road to CMMC readiness. Ben, over to you.
Great to be here. I'm Ben Hughey. I'm a CCA CCP, and like Rich, I have been at this for a number of long years with a lot of folks in the defense industrial base, specifically DoD, DoW organizations, right? So happy to be here and looking forward to the conversation.
Way to correct yourself, Ben, there. Yeah, we all caught you.
Yeah, right? I still can't get it right. You do it every day, and still can't get it right.
Okay, great. So just to set the table, guys, they're going to be covering material. And if you guys look at the very bottom of your screen, there should be a little button that says Q&A. At the tail end, we're going to be addressing any questions that you guys have. So feel free, as Ben and Rich kind of walk you through some of the good stuff, just go ahead and put your questions in the chat and we'll address them at the end of the conversation and webinar today. So with that, Ben, I'll let you take it from here.
All right, Jake, I appreciate it. Get the slides pulled up here. All right. So specifically today, we're going to start with how we approach CMMC and why some of the efforts start to break down, right? CMMC as a whole, it just needs structure, right? This isn't a check the box exercise that we can just get through. And most organizations that we work with, it's not a lack of effort that they're putting in, but it is that lack of structure, right? And when you treat it like a checklist versus a program that is really moving your organization forward, it's no longer really defensible, right? And what we're looking for from an assessor standpoint is really having that defensible and documented system, right? So when we work through that documentation, you can have the right tools, right? You feel like you're in a great spot, you're ready to move, but you're still getting not mets on your assessment, or your POAM items are adding up quickly, right? And it's because it's the lack of demonstration of how your controls actually work, right? Who's responsible for those, and have they been validated, and are they effective, right? When we look at it from an assessor standpoint, we're going to examine, we're going to test, and we're going to talk to you through each one of those controls, right? So your policies, your procedures, and that evidence document that you build that supports your SSP, it's not just paperwork, it's truly your proof, right? And another big thing that we run into is the leadership looking at it as a purely IT function, right? But CMMC is not just an IT function. It's really an organizational commitment, right? And when you look at it from that way, from the top down, and it's not just technical debt, right? We have to have the budget and accountability and that culture driving through our organization. And that's really what moves us forward, right? So, one example of this that I was going to walk through shortly was, working with clients. We had one in particular that had been at it for, over a year. And when we sat down with them, they had some documentation, they had their vendor contracts, and they had, SharePoint folder full of these PDFs. But their SSP didn't align to it, right? Their policies did not align to what they said they were doing. And they'd spent this money, but really it just wasn't in the right places, right? So taking it from there. So that's great. All right, we're moving forward in this presentation. That's good. So thank you, Elmer, for moving through these slides. And Rich, I think I'll hand it over to you from here.
Okie dokie. Elmer, if you could get to, or do I have the slides? I don't have the slides. One more. All right. So what we're going to talk about is a gap assessment that actually drives progress. And you should be doing a gap assessment before you even reach out to a C3PAO. Because this is actually going to be part of the evidence package that you're going to present to the C3PAO as evidence that you do your own self-assessment. Okay. An assessment, a gap assessment, is a roadmap. It's not a scorecard. What you want to do is you want to understand what you have, what you need, and the order in which to build it. A lot of folks who go into CMMC actually have done an awful lot of the work. It's just they can't connect the policies to the procedures, to the SOPs, to the evidence. And that's where the real work lies. So the other thing that you're going to come out of this with is, what order do you want to build your program in? Start with the basics. CMMC is divided into level 1, 2, and 3, and each one builds on top of each other. So as you go down this path, we've all heard the same old adage: how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. So start off with the little bites. Start off with level 1. That's stuff you should be doing anyway, and you might surprise yourself that you really already are. And what is going to happen during an assessment and what's going to happen in this journey is really no secret. The Cyber AB and NIST and the DOW have all published everything that you need. Elmer's put a link up in the chat. That'll take you right to the DoD CIO's page, and you can download just about everything that you need that's official from there. But start off with the scoping guide, and we're going to cover scoping here in just a minute. But this is probably the cornerstone of everything you're going to read. Then go on to the assessment process guide. This is going to tell you exactly how the assessor is going to walk through their assessment. It's going to tell you the artifacts that they're going to look at, the artifacts they're going to produce, and in what order. And then finally, have a look at NIST Special Publication 800-171A. This is the assessment guide for 800-171, and 800-171 is the framework that CMMC is built on. 171 is the framework, CMMC is the enforcement. So out there in the real world, as Jake started off with, there's still some confusion. There's still some gray areas that are out there. But I had a conversation with a mid-sized CEO of a defense industrial-based contracting organization, and I was making a sales call. Let's be realistic about it. And I asked him, I said, "How's your CMMC journey going?" And he's like, "Great, perfect, 110 score." I was like, "Okay, so who reviewed your SSP?" And he literally looked at me and said, "What now?" So without an SSP, he couldn't go forward. So he had posted 110 and actually had pretty close to a negative 100 score. Now, just to let you know, CMMC can be overwhelming, but it's not impossible. You can absolutely go through your gap assessment by yourself, but it takes somebody from the outside to really make sure that you are doing that you're doing what you need to do, and that you're not blinding yourself by saying, "Yeah, we're doing everything," and pencil whipping the whole thing. You need somebody to come out and from the outside and pressure test your thinking. Now let's jump into scoping and architecture decisions. Scoping is probably the most important thing that you're going to do. And why is that? It's because it reduces what your assessor is going to look at. It can reduce your cost, it can reduce your risk, and you can reduce the time that the assessor is going to spend on your organization. If you overscope what you have, let me go back one. If you overscope what you have, then it's going to drive your cost up, but it's also going to expand your attack surface. And it's also going to expand the amount of time that an assessor is going to have to spend on your assessment. That gives them the opportunity to find gaps. Remember that every asset that you put in scope has to be assessed, and you have to have evidence that you are doing what you say you're doing. The wrong way to go about this is to look at what you have and try to fit your scope to your current architecture. You may be putting things in scope that never see or handle or process CUI, and that's the important part. You only want to talk about things that do process CUI. So take your scope, map it out, like sit down with a piece of paper and a pencil and map out where CUI goes. And then that's your scope, or at least the beginning of it. Figure it out from there, keep going. Now, here's another real life example that I ran into where there was a moderately sized contractor in the defense industrial base, and they were just freaking out. They were like, we have 320 endpoints, and I don't know how to control these and that sort of thing. So we sat down and we went through how CUI gets into the organization, where it was processed, where it was stored, and if it exited their organization. And we took those 320 endpoints and we brought it down to 20 that were in scope. Now, there are some hanger-on things like security protection assets. There might have been some OT, but we said, no, that's out of scope. But you can really reduce what you need to talk about with an assessor with if you take a very critical, hard, unemotional look at where your FCI and CUI truly live. Okay? And then scope around that. And at this point, I'm going to hand it back to Ben.
Great stuff there, Rich. Especially around the scoping, right? It's just really, it is so key to understand that flow, right? Because that's going to determine everything that you need to do for your organization. All right, next slide, please. All right, implementation. So implementation, this really isn't a one-time event, right? If you guys are locked into what CMMC is and how it's working today, right, is an ongoing discipline, right? Once you get through that initial assessment, it's actually a triennial phase for you, right? Every year you actually have to send in an attestation that states, hey, we're still working through our CMMC and we're up to date, right? And in the third year of that cycle, you'll actually do another certification, right? So your controls, they're configured, right? That's the IT physical part. They're documented, they're tested, and they're maintained, right? Because if the control works, but we don't have the evidence to back that up or to prove that when an assessor shows up, it's just not going to survive that audit, right? And your C3PAO, when you start down that path, they will be able to suss this out pretty quickly. And they'll say, okay, well, show me, right? And hopefully you're at that point where you're able to just show them each and every one, boom, 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 here it is, nice and concise, right? Next slide, please. So the controls themselves, and this is what really gets a lot of folks going, they aren't just technical, right? As we mentioned earlier in this webinar, many are process driven and there are people requirements, right? We have our administrators identified and we're separating those the duties between them, right? Between your standard users and your administrative accounts, right? These aren't just technical controls. There's a technical piece, but there's a lot that goes into it, right? Incident response, we're talking access reviews, and then your training, specifically the training. That's not just a CMMC function, but the DOW mandates that we're taking those trainings specifically around insider threats if you're handling CUI, right? And these require human action and they have to be done annually and attested to, right? So one thing that we like to say is build your calendar around those controls, not the other way around, right? So we have a process and we're doing it. And maybe it's once a year, right? And I've had a number of folks that say, okay, well, we did it once, check the box. That's not good enough, right? But you don't have to do it every single month. It doesn't have to be a quarterly function. As an assessor, if I come in and I say, hey, you did that in June and, all 10 of your admins signed off on the training, great, right? That's perfect. That shows me that the control has been implemented, it's being tracked, and it's being maintained. Next slide, please, Omer. All right. So don't implement your controls in isolation, right? This is a fun topic, right? But every control has to be tied back to your SSP. The SSP is the golden rule, right? And if it's not in your SSP, it's going to be a not met, right? So that is the living record of your security posture, right? And it's not just a document you write once. When you're going through the process and you're updating things and you're updating how those controls are implemented in your business, right? We're tightening things up. Maybe we have an enclave that's a little tighter now, right? Or a single business that we're able to tie things to. The SSP needs to reflect that, because if it's broad and it's your entire network, well, then your scope just expanded as Rich had talked about, right? So the SSP is the cornerstone or the bedstone of your program. Next slide, please. Documentation. This, you guys, I know I keep saying it's key, but we had a particular client. They had a wonderful IRP, right, or incident response plan, end-to-end, outlined, documented. It was signed off by all the right folks, right? As we mentioned, not just the technical side. IT did their part, but HR ratified it, right? The board says, hey, we understand that we have an incident response plan and things are tied to it, right? So if there's an actual material issue, we know how to respond to the DOW. We know who to contact, both internally and externally. But when we started to go through that actual assessment, we received, different answers from different folks, right? Because while it was documented and at the surface it appeared to be great, it was never actually tested, right? The left hand did not know what the right hand was doing. And that unfortunately becomes a not met, right, during an assessment. Easily correctable, right? Those are things that we can we can pick up on, and we'll call them low-hanging fruit. But the implementation that stands up to an audit, right, is documented, it's tested, it's maintained, and definitely not reconstructed just the week before, hopefully. Next slide, please. That's right. All right. One more for me. All right. You guys have been tremendous. So let's go ahead and jump into what audit readiness is and what that really means, right? What is ready? Next slide, please. So ready does not mean perfect, right? And I'm not just going to read from the slide here, but you guys have to understand that CMMC as a program, right? As your organization is looking at it, it means that you're able to demonstrate those controls and they're operating as you said, right? We have a password policy, and this is when we do our resets. This is the process that we take, right? While the program itself may be, designed specifically around protecting CUI and non-federal environments, as an assessor, we're not looking for completely eliminated risk, right? We're looking for a mature, defensible program that you can speak to, right? And you can speak to it confidently, and you can demonstrate that your controls are in place and your organization is really on top of things. Next slide. All right, POAMs. Everybody loves to talk about POAMs when we initially talk, but we might have skipped over one here, Elmer. I apologize. Whoops. Here we go. This is what happens in a live webinar. We'll stay on POAMs, please, sir. So your POAM items, they're there and they are tracked, right? So if you have something on there, that open item has to be documented, prioritized, and have a remediation schedule, right? A POAM does not mean you failed. This isn't a weakness necessarily for your organization, right? Again, from an assessor standpoint, I look at it as evidence of your maturing program, right? We have something, we're tracking it, we have a priority around it, right? We have a team working on it, and we're managing that risk honestly, right? To tie back to Rich's client story there, 110, it's not an impossible hill to climb, right? But we don't all start out perfect. So we have to make our way there. And that POAM is that document. So when I see a POAM, typically it's aligning those items, again, the what's in the SSP versus the actual control that has been implemented. And there's a variation between there. But when you get to the certification process and the assessor's there, your C3PO, and you're going through all the things together, your POAM, you will have 180 days to rectify that and to get over that hump for your certification, right? So there's a window there. We can call it a tight window depending on the control, but again, not insurmountable, right? So when you have those POAMs, own them, and we can move forward with you together. Next slide. Mock assessments. So these are so key for so many things, right? Before that C3PO shows up, really you need to walk through what you have and why you have it and how you can demonstrate each one of those controls, right? A lot of times, and right now in our current landscape, C3POs are booking out, months in advance, right? So when you're ready to book that and you say, okay, we have a target date, start going through those. Have that third party, have a Secure-Centric, an RPO, CCA, or another C3PO in advisory capacity because they can't do your assessment and advise. Challenge your evidence, right? Ask some of those hard questions and find those gaps before they show up at the door and you're on the clock, right? I have worked with a number of MSPs in the defense industrial base specifically that work with C3POs in tandem, right? And they say, hey, challenge this control. Let's make sure that what we see is what's actually going to be assessed, right? And they can go through those things together and, like I said, pick them apart a little bit, ask those hard questions, and ensure that everything is on alignment, right? Because the last thing we want to do is go back to our board, back to our leadership and say, hey, we have to push this out another 6 months, right? Which is not a conversation we ever want to have. So let's go ahead with the next slide, please. All right. So story time again, we had, and you guys will notice these are recurring themes, right? It's the same issues that are out there consistently, and some are unique to the environments. But we had a client that their SSP was done, controls are implemented, evidence is collected. So great, you're all set, you're locked in with your C3PO. And we came in and did a mock review, right? Cherry picked some of those controls, and we found multiple controls where the documented procedure and the actual practice did not match, right? So again, let's walk through it. Let's figure out what that delta is and make that adjustment, right? 2 weeks, was a strong enough barrier to get through it and fix those, right? And make sure that the documentation was aligned. Would 3 months have been better? 6 months have been better? Sure. But it was enough to get that particular client over that hump and get that successful certification. Next slide. So the key takeaway here really is that ready, if you will, means that you can walk that assessor through your program with confidence, right? Not because it was perfect, but because you know exactly where you stand. You know those controls in and out, right? You know where the documentation lies, and you tied it all back to your SSP, and you guys are ready to move forward. All right.
Good stuff, man. Way to bring the heat. All right, guys. Well, we've got some questions in the chat. I think we got almost 6 here. So what I'll do, guys, is I'll fire them off, and then I'll kind of let you each have if you have something to say on it, Ben or Rich, you can take it on. If not, you can just divert it to the next person. So let's kind of kick this off. The first one is, from what I have read, what is CUI is defined generally overall and specifically by each contract. The challenge then is training individuals to properly classify material. Sure, systems can look to identify misclassified items, but it's the individuals first. Am I on base here?
So yeah, you are on base there, Chris. First of all, you have to remember that it is your contract that or your prime that is on the hook for properly marking CUI. Now, out there in the industry, we know that doesn't always happen. In fact, there is, I'm not going to say an epidemic, but there is a problem with even the government that they either undermark or overmark. And, we love to tell stories around here. So I'll give you a great example. I received a blank form from the government one day, and it was marked CUI. Not CUI when filled in, The blank form was CUI. And so I pushed back on that. I was like, first of all, you sent it to me in open email. Not good. And it's clearly marked at the top, CUI. So you've got that craziness. But you also have to remember that under CMMC level 2, you have an awareness and training program that has to be in place. And part of that awareness and training has to be handling CUI. The good news here is that you have a free resource for that. If you look up, I believe the title is Mandatory CUI Training, DOD, some combination of those words. You have about an hour-long CUI training course handed to you by the government. And so that is a good start. There are other vendors out there that can help you fill in the gaps, but start there. And also with your either with your prime or with the government, you want to look for two other documents. You want to look for something called a CDRL. That's going to tell you what kind of information you're going to get. And then you're also going to want to ask for the SCG, or the Security Classification Guide. That's also going to help you look at the data that you get and figure out whether it's CUI or not. FCI is a little bit easier. Those are contract documents. Think about it in this terms. Would I need a FOIA order to get that document? If the answer is yes, that's probably FCI. So, Ben, I don't know if you have anything to add on to that long-winded story time.
No, I think it was a good explanation and a great question, Chris, right? So when you're receiving that data, yes, it is outlined in the contract. And this will actually go with the another question that was posted below, which is how do we know what we need to protect, right? And it's always outlined in that contract, right? One thing that I do like to point out is once you have that data and you mark it, then you are the owner of that document, right? And for the CUI classification and marking, you are trying to find a nice word for it, but effectively, right, you're on the hook for it at that point. So even if it comes across misclassified, if you reclassify it or mark it properly, that is now, your living document. So yes, absolutely at the individual level. This is why bringing that data in through secure mechanisms, as Rich said, right? Not just outright over email or plain text. Having a repository and knowing where your CUI data flow is so key.
Excellent.
I hope.
Well, the next question is very similar. Ben, you kind of alluded to it. I'll just expand upon it and see if Rich has anything to add. So another question was, we are a small defense contractor with about 65 employees. Every system we use feels connected to our work. How do we know what actually needs to be in scope versus out of scope? Ben, I feel like you could address that. Do you want to take it deeper, or should we pass it to Rich?
Yeah, no, I'm happy to talk about it, right? So, anonymous attendee. Really the key there again is what's in your contract, right? So when you say that, hey, I feel like everything's interconnected, in some cases it really is, right? And if you're a defense contractor, and maybe this is 80% of your business, right? Maybe it's 100% of your business, then your scope is going to be larger than someone who has a single contract, right? And maybe it's 5%, and they're able to isolate or build that enclave and have that, what I'd call super scoped kind of CUI function. But really, it starts with what that program is and what you're doing via that contract. So, I would work with your internal team to follow up on that, understand, hey, what are we actually on the hook for? And how does that data flow? And that's gonna help you drive your scope and build it out.
Excellent. Rich, do you want to add to that?
No, that's good. Go ahead.
Excellent. All right, next question. Oh man, I get this one a lot. We're evaluating the use of a hybrid commercial GCC high tenant. I understand it's possible to go 100% commercial tenant, but the additional controls and costs have to be weighted against the cost of GCC high. What are your opinions on this? Want to kick it off, Rich?
Yeah, sure. Okay, Chris. First of all, have a really hard look at what the data is that you are handling. GCC high, and I know that there are a lot of folks that jump just straight to that. GCC high is really more appropriate for export control and ITAR. If you are not handling export control or ITAR, GCC moderate is just fine. And it's a fraction of the cost of GCC high. The only thing that you have to worry about, well, you have to worry about a lot of things, but one of the things to be cognizant of is that the Microsoft GCC environment tends to lag behind the commercial environment when it comes to features. So if you're used to working in the commercial environment and your favorite widget was there and you move over to the GCC environment, it may not be there for a while. So just be aware of that. Now, as far as going with a commercial tenant, if you're handling real CUI, I would not recommend that at all. You're putting a much bigger burden on yourself to try and convince an assessor that that's going to fly. GCC moderate does not come with the hefty price tag that high does. So really consider that first before you put yourself through the agony of trying to try to shoehorn commercial into what is required. So Ben, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I think you covered it, right? And again, really look at what data you have, and that again, that's going to direct you which way you need to go, especially with the ITAR function. If you don't have it, then why pay the premium? So yeah, great stuff
Excellent.
there, Rich.
All right, Rich, you did Ben's job for him. He didn't have anything to add. All right, so next question. All right, man. Okay, what is the difference between having documentation and having evidence? I keep hearing that term, but I'm not clear on what assessors are actually looking for. Rich, you want to go first?
No, I'm going to defer to Ben first on this one.
Okay, Rich defers. Ben.
Yeah, no, that's fine, right? So it's not just an assessor standpoint, right? This is really kind of a key audit function, right? Your documentation itself, right, is going to be this is what we have and this is why we do it, and your evidence is going to be that proof, right? Another way I like to explain it is your policies versus your procedures, right? Your policy is the intent and what's expected, right? And your procedure is how you actually do that. So when you take things from that perspective and you build out said documentation, then you tie the evidence to it. Every time we make a change in our organization, then we only have to update or predominantly only have to update the actual evidence portion, right? It's a new screenshot or maybe it's an update here, but our intent and how we documented it is pretty rigid. I hope that helps explain it in not so many details. Rich?
The only thing I would add on to that is that evidence collection is an ongoing thing, just like everything else. An assessor is not going to accept year-old evidence. So make it a habit of collecting your evidence over the course of your year, because you have to do a self-assessment. And then you're going to have to do a 3-year for a level 2. You're going to have to do an every 3-year outside assessment. Make sure that your evidence is fresh. Okay, and show a history. Don't delete your old evidence. You want to be able to show that history to the assessor that, yes, we've been doing this for the past however long.
Man, gotta say, man, compliance makes IT a little bit less fun. You know what I'm saying? With all the documentation. Anyway, moving on. All right. So for organizations that already have controls, I'm going to send this to you, Ben. For organizations that already have controls technically implemented, where do you most often see CMMC assessments fail? The actual security posture, the evidence collection process, or ownership of the governance side of the program?
Yeah. I feel like that's an easy one, right? It's not so much the evidence, it's going to be how that's presented and tying it all back together, right? So you can have everything technically implemented, but if it's not documented and tied back to your SSP as a whole, it's going to be an uphill battle, right? And I can't think of any C3PAO that would come in and say, hey, you're ready to be assessed without having that documentation in place. So great question.
Do you add anything to that, Rich? Do you disagree?
No.
Oh, you don't disagree. Okay.
No.
What you want us to have a cage match? I mean, is that what
I
you're
mean,
pushing for?
I'm hoping for one, at least one. Okay, next question. This one is to Rich. Our gap assessment showed we were missing a lot of controls, but we later found out some systems were not even included. Do we need to start the whole thing over?
So the good news is that your gap assessment or your gap analysis is an internal function. You do not have to report any of that to the government or anyone outside of your organization. So it's up to you if you want to start the thing all over or do a delta gap or whatever feels comfortable for you. As long as you keep using the same methodology and as long as you tie your processes, procedures, SOPs, and I guess procedures and SOPs are the same thing, and then tie that to your evidence and include it in your body of evidence. So really, don't beat yourself up because you missed a couple things. In your gap assessment, not a big deal. In front of a C3PAO, big deal.
Excellent. For time's sake, Ben, if you don't have a strong opinion, we're going to move on.
Moving on.
Moving on. Okay. Next question. You may have already gone over this, but I would like a recap of this once more, please. How do you recommend organizations balance operational reality with strict assessment evidence requirements, especially when controls may exist in practice, but document maturity hasn't caught up yet? Great question. Ben, you go first.
Sure. Yeah. So again, another really good question, and I think a lot of folks are in this boat, right? For me, and we didn't go super into my background, but I was a practitioner and I ran a CMMC program for a number of organizations, before I was consulting for them. So for me specifically, when I'm sitting in your seat, and how do I make that actual balance happen, right? It's more of a discussion from the top down, I feel, than it is really this juggling act, right? Because since your SSP and your documentation is living and breathing, right? When you talk to your leadership team and say, hey, we have 40% of this in place and we just need to spend all this time documenting it, and this is where we're struggling or we're trying to catch up to move this effort forward. I think that's a much easier conversation than we're missing 40 technical controls, right? So when you think of it in that manner, I think it becomes a much easier discussion than you actually realize. Rich, any comments there?
No, I think you hit it.
Excellent. Okay, this one I think I may have missed over, but this one, Rich, you can kick this one off. As a US DoD contractor, DOW, no, I'm just kidding. As a US DoW subcontractor, How do we know which CMMC level we must meet? Does that come from our customer who holds the contract with the US DoD or DOW? We know we aren't level 3, but we just can't determine if we're level 1 and level 2. That's a big decision to make. Rich?
Yeah. This will definitely come from, if you are a prime contractor, it will be in your contract with the U.S. government. Also refer back to that CDRL document that we mentioned before. Some people call it a CDRL. If you are a subcontractor to a prime, it is up to the prime to tell you exactly what level you have to be at. Generally, if you are simply holding a contract but are not handling CUI, you're going to be at level 1. But also understand that the government is as clear as dense fog on this, in that they have left it up to the individual program office and contracting offices to dictate what level they are. And level 3, you'll know it. And like you said, you know you're not level 3, but level 1, if all you have is a contract and you're not handling CUI, then you only need to be at level 1 for FCI. But yeah, your question is correct. It's going to come from either the government or from your prime.
Excellent.
Yeah, and just to tack on there and drive that point home, if you're only handling the FCI or federal contract information, that is level 1 all the way. As soon as you have CUI written into your contract, you are going to be looking at level 2.
Excellent. All right. Next question. I'm going to send this one to you, Ben. If we utilize a SaaS vendor for a system and determine that system is in scope, is a FedRAMP certification enough? If not, what else would be required from said SaaS vendor?
Yeah, and so the cloud service providers, this is always a hot topic, right? So one, how are you utilizing that SaaS vendor, right? And what data is in that system, right? If they're handling, processing, storing CUI, then they need to be FedRAMP certified, FedRAMP moderate at the minimum. But also in between there, when they're doing that, they have an SRM or a shared responsibility matrix that they should be able to share with you, Chris, which will tell you exactly what controls they handle versus what is in scope for you, right? And that's going to be a key item there. So if you look at the DFARS 7012 clause, not to be super nerdy, I believe it's E through G. That spells out everything that you need to know about a cloud service provider or a SaaS vendor. Rich, anything to tack on there?
Yeah, first of all, I want to say I don't use Claude for my AI. I use Ben because he knows where everything is. The only other thing that I would tack onto that is that when the C3PAO comes in, depending on who your external service provider is, they may require them to be at the table. Virtually or physically, probably virtually. I think in person assessments have gone out the window. Now they will have some waivers for that. Nobody expects Microsoft to be at the table, but just make sure that your external service provider, if they are of the proper size, are willing to at least be on a phone call with you.
Excellent. Okay, so this is a question regarding earlier in the presentation, Ben, when you were talking about, some of the most common mistakes when you see organizations are kind of going on their CMMC journey. So what this individual asked is, what is the single most common mistake you see organizations make right at the beginning of their CMMC journey? Oh man, I want to answer this question. Before they even start implementation. We are a small manufacturing org preparing everything for November. C3PAO check. FYI.
Awesome. Glad to hear you got that locked in. So manufacturing has been my world for years and years. So I love to see you out there. A couple of the biggest things that come to mind, right? One, not understanding how CUI flows through your environment, right? Because especially in manufacturing, if that data, uh, folks say, hey, it comes in and our contracts team handles it and the admin piece, and that's where our CUI lives. Well, did that go to engineering? Is this a design document? Is there G code involved? Are we moving this data from here to there to print or build, cut, weld, any type of part, in your manufacturing process? Well, every step of the way, right, it keeps growing larger. So understanding how that flow happens is so key, right? So a lot of folks believe they understand that. And then once you actually start going through that process, you realize, hey, this expanded quite a bit. And another thing that I see consistently are folks that just go out and purchase a tool that says, hey, this is CMMC compliant, and they put all their data in there, only to find out that that doesn't actually work within their organization. I've seen that happen a number of times, and it hurts, right? Because that's money that has been spent, that is hard earned for your organization. So getting a handle on that, not just purchasing tools to purchase tools. A tool can only facilitate a process. So understanding those processes for your particular org, those things are key. And I hope that helps.
Right. Awesome. We're going to move on because we just got a couple more minutes and we have 3 more questions. So we're going to fire through these. Rich, I'm going to give you the first one. We're setting up an enclave with a single endpoint, one user. This user is the only one that handles CUI. The secretary that handles the contract for that work, but does not handle CUI, do they need to be included in the enclave? Or can they just work outside the enclave and not be part of the level 2 rating?
Man, Martin, this is a beautiful scoping question. It really is. So your diagram is going to have 2 little bubbles inside of it. One says CUI, one says FCI. The person that handles CUI is going to be in the, say it with me now, CUI bubble, and your secretary is going to be in the FCI bubble. And that is how you're going to scope them out. And your assessor will look at that and say, fine. They may ask for evidence of your level 1 self-assessment, but the only person and the only assets that are going to be in the level 2 assessment is going to be the person and the equipment that handles CUI. And that is how you scope things.
Excellent. Excellent. Ben, anything you want to add to that, or we going to move on?
No, I love it. It was so good.
I think this next question we already covered.
I think that's a dupe. Yeah.
So that's a dupe. I mean, the last question is, are we going to be sharing the slide deck? Which, do you guys know the answer to that question?
See, Jake, it's your show. You see where it says CEO right next to your name tag? Right there.
Yeah,
right?
I gotta ask marketing afterwards. I believe we are. I know we're sharing the recording with everyone, and so that actually kind of concludes our conversation today, guys. I want to thank everyone for showing up. We are going to be sharing the recording with you. I have to double check and make sure we're going to be sharing. We can share the slide deck as well. We really appreciate all you guys coming out, asking some questions. Feel free to reach out to anyone here if you need help. Our objective here at Secure-Centric is to help create as much trust and clarity for you guys as possible. We know how daunting this journey is, how it can really cost a lot of money if you make the wrong decisions. So if you have, those one-off questions and you need support, feel free to reach out. It's our objective to help you guys. We also do a weekly YouTube video as well, where we actually take questions and we will address questions as they come through. So feel free to subscribe to that as well. It's called CMMC Community Questions, and that can be another area where you pose questions to some of our CMMC experts in this space. I think that's all I have. Did you guys have anything else you wanted to say before we close out today?
No, thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you.
Awesome, guys. Well, thanks everyone for joining today. Feel free to reach out, and if you ever have any questions, we're always here to help you guys.
All right. Take care.
Excellent. Thanks, guys.